Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. It's the end of 2023, which means that I need to do a whiskey roundup. This is where I talk about all of, in this case, the American whiskeys that I have reviewed this year. We're going to talk about what I rated them at the time, so ignore it, try it, buy it, stock it. I'm going to talk about what I would rate it now if my opinion's changed at all, because that'll be really interesting, I think. And then at the end, I'll pick one from all of them just for fun that I absolutely think would be the one that you should pick of all of those. So this is not going to be of all of the bourbons that came out this year, because there's just no way I could taste those all. This is of all the bourbons I chose to review this year. Starting us off is actually the first review that I did this year. This is the Knob Creek Special Reserve. Now the Knob Creek Special Reserve, this one is about $70 in my area. And here's why I initially gave this a rating of try it. Although I think this is a pretty good bourbon, I don't know that it's significantly better than the typical 100 proof that you would normally buy now. And that one's about $30. So for twice the price, is this one worth buying for such a large sum? I don't think so. Now I put try it because people who love Knob Creek, Adriana, Clifton, I'm looking at you, you guys will want all the variety that you can have, and maybe the subtle changes between them would be worth it for you. But for me, it was not. So I gave this one a try it, and then I drank about half the bottle. On Dungeons & Drams, we often end up with Knob Creek.
Let me ask you, since I assumed that you'd be drinking Knob Creek, I picked out, I have my regular Knob Creek, the 100 proof. I've got the Single Barrel Reserve, which I think I'm going to have that second because that's 120. And then I have my Rye.
And because of that, I end up reaching for this. Now, I reach for this more than I reach for the regular Knob Creek, which should tell you something. Maybe it's just I want to drink something a little nicer, or maybe it truly is that it's a little bit better. But even still, I'm going to maintain that I give this a try it, and I think that that is a fair evaluation for this whiskey. Up next is a whiskey that I gave a rating of buy it to. This is actually funny to me because Old Grandad, this is a very inexpensive bottle. I want to say this is like $20. But as you can see, it is, I basically held on to this just so I could put it into this video. I'll probably finish this later. I love this one as a buy it for a few reasons. Number one, obviously it's very inexpensive. If you have something that is pretty good to good at a $20 price tag, that makes it so much more appealing to buy. But this also mixes really well into cocktails. It tastes pretty good neat, and in general, it's just a good, solid whiskey. I was actually very surprised how much I ended up liking this one. So I did give it a buy it, and I'm going to maintain that I think this one deserves a buy it, if not a stock it. I don't really see much of a reason not to have this one in your on your shelves unless you have some other cheaper bourbon that you really like as well. Now we have the Old Grandad 114. Now this is another one, obviously, very similar to the last. It's inexpensive, and whereas the Old Grandad regular, you could get that for like $18 to $20, this one's only like maybe $25, but for me, where this one lost some points, I ended up giving it a try it, was number one, it's not very available. So for me, I drove between 3 different states, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, just casually looking at liquor stores or whatever, and I never saw it a single time. That hurts its availability for me. But if it's in your area, that doesn't matter to you at all. So more about the taste. This one is fine if you're going to be mixing it. I think it's a better mixer than the regular Old Grandad because the higher ABV does hold up a little bit more. But then when I considered what it takes to sip it and which one I liked more, I actually preferred the regular Old Grandad to the 114, which seems a little surprising because I do tend to like higher proof whiskeys, and that actually said a lot to me. So where the price points don't really matter, you know, the price points are similar, you might want to consider whether it'd be worth it to try them yourself. But for me, it's a try it. It remains a try it. Let's move on. Now we move on to something that's an absolute buy it. This was ECBP C922. So this was technically the last one to come out in 2022, but for me, I didn't try it till 2023, actually about almost halfway through the year. So again, this is my list from just what I reviewed in 2023, so keep that in mind. But as far as ECBP everything, I would say that they are routinely a solid buy. It is few and far between where they put out a batch that just doesn't do it for the general audience, and this one was awesome. So I would highly recommend if you see the C922, you should absolutely pick it up. The prices on ECBP have gone up quite a bit. I saw one just yesterday for $80. I used to be able to get them for $55 only a couple of years ago, so I'm hopeful that maybe that liquor store was just a little expensive, but I'm guessing that the word has just gotten around that they tend to be very good quality, and maybe the prices have gone up. Let me know what they are in your area. What is an ECBP generally going for at a local store near you? 13th Colony did everything right this last year. They reached out to a lot of whiskey channels like myself, and they got bottles in our hands, and they said, hey, give us a fair review. Now, I did go back and forth with them a little bit on email because I had some questions and whatever, but what I ultimately learned is small distillery puts out a bourbon for $45 at 47.5% ABV. That almost never happens anymore. And because of that, I think they got this attention and this positive attention that they deserve, because not only did it come out like it's a pretty good bourbon, but more so putting it at that 47.5 allows the bourbon to carry more and better flavors than it would otherwise. Now, I put this one at a buy it, and I still stand by that. I'd be a little bit on the lower side of buy it at this point, almost to the point of try it, because I do think that as they get a little bit more kind of like secure in their distillery, they're going to be putting out slightly nicer stuff as their bourbons. Like, I would bet that this flavor profile will change over the next couple of years. But let's also talk about the double oak, because that also came out, and I have had a sample of that. I no longer have that sample because it somehow miraculously disappeared. I don't know how that happened. Now, that was a $65 bottle at around, I want to say 67%, which is pretty darn high. And it might have been 62. Either way, it was over 60%. And that was a great whiskey. Now, I did not give it any sort of rating because it was a sample that you really couldn't get anymore. But what I did say about it and what I remember about it is liking it a whole lot. I do know that it got rave reviews from other channels as well. So I think the double oak, as they come out with that every year, it would be something I would suggest you look to get if you can. But this bourbon is something that you could absolutely pick up. It's, like I said, probably under $50 and something good. So this is a buy it. The double oak, I would say worth your money at $65 for something like that. Totally worth your money. I would maintain this one as a buy it, and the other one probably the same. Henry McKenna 10-year is one of my favorite bourbons so far this year, and the year's basically over, so it's going to stay that way. But the Henry McKenna 10-year has had some availability issues as of late, and the ones that are available are starting to hit some of that higher price points that you're seeing among other bourbons that are starting to get a little bit more rare, and that makes bourbon less valuable to me. I find that there is just an abundance of really good bourbons out there, especially from smaller distilleries, that when these larger distilleries like Heaven Hill end up putting out Henry McKenna for a lower MSRP, but then you never see it in the stores for that low. I don't know whose fault that is. I have actually kind of looked into this a bit, and the whole, I might do a video in the future about why things like Blanton's cost so much. It's not just inflation, there are other reasons. But Henry McKenna's starting to hit that same problem where I just saw this yesterday for $89, which, God, I would never buy that for that. It should be $45, $50 in my opinion. But it tastes really good. I would buy this for $60 personally, and I think that's probably about what I did. Either way, let's talk about the flavor here, because price always does kind of come into a factor here, but prices vary so much that might not be the same thing that you get. With this, I gave it a stock it, which is a little presumptuous given what I just said about availability. That being said, I love this on my shelf. I will probably pay a premium to have this continuously be on my shelf, and I just love this bourbon. I think it's a fantastic whiskey. Before I continue, I want to take 2 seconds just to tell you a little bit about something cool that I did this year, especially because it has to do with bourbon and rye. So this is the Apricot Affair, and this is Stellum R2D8. These are 2 single barrel picks that I ended up doing this year, and I love them both. Obviously, I picked them. I wouldn't pick them if I didn't. But this one brings to the table this awesome apricot flavor that I don't think I've really tasted in anything else. Maybe the seagrass that they did, and that's probably the closest thing I would compare it to, but it is vastly different than that. And it has a higher ABV, 61.5. I'm not sure if it's higher than seagrass, more just saying higher ABV. So if you are interested in this, it's at whiskeydickpicks.com. I would very much appreciate you checking it out because I'd love to do some more single barrel picks, but I gotta move some product. And this is awesome. So, Stellum. Stellum was, I wanted to do a rye that would bring bourbon lovers into rye, and this is exactly what that came to fruition as. So if you love bourbon or if you love rye, this will be what you want. Think of it as the forefront is bourbon, the aftertaste is rye. That's probably the best way to think about it. This one's actually fairly cheap too, and that's also on Whiskey Dick Picks. And since I'm talking about it, I'll kind of move past this one quick, but this is probably my favorite pick that I've done ever. This one is the Starward. This is an Australian whiskey. I called this Radiant Red Solera, and it tastes like red berries. Almost think of like a sherried Scotch, but kind of different, a little bit more fruity. Very, very good. WhiskeyDickPics.com. Check it out. Now moving on to the only two that I did here that weren't bourbons. Now this is Old Line. This is an American single malt, and it originally got a buy it. I would maintain that it's still a buy it. I really, really enjoy this one whenever I decide to crack it. And I just think that you should look for anything Old Line. You probably won't find this one anymore. This used to be called the Old Line 86. It doesn't have any sort of numbers or anything on it. They just call it that because it's 86 proof. So the Old Line 86, it carries a lot of flavor in that 86 proof, and it's something I would very much suggest you check out, especially because I want to personally promote American single malts within this country. So pushing anything from them, as long as it's worth pushing, is going to be good. And I think that their newer stuff is going to be even better. Last, we have the 13th Colony Rye. This one is a buy it from me, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards try it now that I've had it a little bit longer. It's not something, there's actually even just a layer of dust here. Like, I haven't really gone back to this one. And to be fair, I don't go to too many ryes very often, but I do sometimes when I'm making cocktails or if I just feel like I'm in that mood, especially if I'm hanging out with like Ed on Dungeons and Drams or something. He loves ryes, so sometimes I feel inspired. But as far as 13th Colony goes, I think that they do a very good job with their bourbons. I think their rye was fine, and it was like okay for the price. So that was why I gave it that tentative try it, buy it. I would lean more towards try it at this point, especially the proof is just in how little of it I've drank since. Let's talk about Russell's Reserve 10. Now, I don't have a bottle of this anymore because as you saw from my video, the cork ended up falling in it, and that's about all the excuse I need in order to find myself finishing the bottle. Now, I have not rebought the bottle yet. However, I do maintain that it's a stock it. I just simply haven't gotten around to doing that yet. I tend not to buy a whole lot of stuff at the end of the year because I'm kind of wrapping up what I already had. But the Russell's Reserve was a stock it in the video. I maintain it should still be a stock it. As far as Wild Turkey goes, everything that they make is awesome, in my opinion. Even the stuff I don't love, I still concede is very, very good. So Russell's Reserve, stock it, continue to be a stock it, go get it. And that brings me to the whiskey that I'm going to nominate as my personal choice from all of the whiskeys that I've drank this year, and that is going to be the Russell's Reserve 10-year-old. Now, this seems like maybe a strange choice, but probably not if you consider everything that I've had so far this year. Russell's Reserve is something that I have really only recently introduced myself to. As you know, every Thanksgiving I do a Wild Turkey expression. I just think that's funny, right? I wear my hat, I do whatever. With the Russell's Reserve 10, I was surprised how much I loved this. I had actually put it off. This is a silly reason to put it off, but it's as good a reason as any. I don't love the labels. So when I would look at the shelves and I'd be like picking something that just looked interesting, that was not the one that ever stood out to me. And I really only got to it because I ran out of regular Wild Turkeys to review, at least ones that I want to. So Russell's Reserve 10 ended up getting a stock it from me when I did the review. I don't have the bottle anymore because, as you might have seen in the review, I ended up accidentally knocking the cork into the bottle. And because of that, that was all the excuse I needed to finish the bottle in about a night and a half, maybe about half the bottle. So it went real fast and I loved every sip of it. And I think you will too. So I think that you should go out of your way this year. If you've never tried a Russell's Reserve, go get the Russell's Reserve 10-year-old bourbon. I think it's fantastic and it would be my choice this year for my favorite bourbon that I've had. All right. Thank you, everybody. I will see you tomorrow for the episode on Scotch. And I want to take another minute just to recommend Whiskey Dick Pics, so go check that out. And while you're doing it now, while you're thinking about it, at least go browse. Also, I want to take another minute just over the course of the year. I've had a number of patrons who have been helping the channel, and I want to take a moment just to recognize them and thank them. So thank you guys all for being patrons. And I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.